In the mid-8th century BCE, the northern kingdom of Israel entered a massive economic boom. Under King Jeroboam II, military threats faded, borders expanded to their greatest extent since Solomon, and the state took control of major international trade routes. The nation was flush with wealth. For the elite class in the capital city of Samaria, this luxury meant one thing: divine approval. They built houses of ivory, lounged on expensive imported beds, and assumed their secure borders were proof that God favored their lifestyle. But archaeological evidence reveals how that wealth was actually generated. These ancient stone weights were the standard tools of commerce in the markets. Merchants would shave or manipulate these weights to cheat customers, shortchanging the poor on grain while trapping them in predatory lending schemes. If a farmer tried to seek relief, they found the legal system was just as compromised. Judges took bribes at the city gates, and the courts were rigged to favor the wealthy. The debt cycle was so aggressive that people were sold into slavery for amounts as small as the price of a pair of sandals. Israel had built a period of intense regional prosperity, but that growth was entirely dependent on the systematic exploitation of its most vulnerable citizens. You might expect the religious leaders of the day to step in. Instead, the professional priests and politicians were fully bought in, using religious festivals to provide a veneer of stability to a rotting social fabric. The person who finally spoke up didn't come from the capital. His name was Amos, and he lived here, in the vast, arid highlands of the southern kingdom of Judah. He wasn't a credentialed priest or a professional prophet. He was a rugged, working-class shepherd. Amos supported himself as a dresser of these sycamore figs. To make this bitter fruit edible, a laborer had to climb the trees and pierce or slit every individual fig by hand to stimulate ripening. It was tedious, manual work that defined his daily life. Then Amos did something unprecedented. He dropped his tools, left his home, and marched directly into the wealthy, hostile northern capital to confront the elite establishment face to face. Because Amos was a politically unconnected, blue-collar worker, he had the independence to speak the truth to an establishment that everyone else was avoiding. Amos arrived in Bethel, the epicenter of Israel's religious and economic power. Right in the middle of a packed high society festival, he launched an aggressive public indictment. He mocked the ultra-wealthy for their apathy. He called out the elites for feasting on fatted calves and lounging on imported ivory while the lower class was trampled into the dust. He laid out the specific legal crimes: the weaponization of debt, excessive taxation on the poor, and blatant bribery at the gates. When the people tried to dissent, the wealthy silenced them. Amos pointed out that the establishment forced ascetic Nazarites to break their sacred vows and commanded the true prophets to stop speaking uncomfortable truths. Amos exposed the culture of Samaria not as a byproduct of success, but as an intentionally engineered system of human exploitation. The elites relied on a specific ideological defense. They believed that as long as they maintained elaborate sacrifices, expensive offerings, and beautiful music, they were right with God. Amos delivered a devastating counterargument. He announced that God hates and despises their religious festivals and would no longer listen to their music. He argued that religious rituals are worthless if they are not accompanied by ethical behavior. On this scale, the massive weight of their religious ritual failed to balance out their empty commitment to fair treatment. In this framework, the only valid metric for true worship is the tangible protection of the vulnerable and the fair treatment of neighbors. Amos rejected the religious logic of his day. He drew a hard line, declaring that no amount of ceremony can mask the active exploitation of other human beings. This all led to a tense standoff. Amaziah, the high priest of Bethel, ordered Amos to return to Judah and never prophesy again. Amos refused to back down. He delivered an ultimatum: let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. In that dry, desert geography, rolling water isn't a gentle stream. It is a violent flash flood. Amos warned them of an unstoppable wave of accountability that would wash away their corruption. The elites ignored the warning, but history proved Amos right. The Assyrian Empire swept through, destroying the ivory houses and deporting the population, a conquest documented right here in this Assyrian bas-relief carving. The collapse of Israel's Golden Age verified Amos's warning. A society built on systemic injustice cannot survive its own internal rot. Amos's writings provided a blueprint for the conviction that genuine faith is inseparable from social equity. This ancient message against systemic inequality eventually became a cornerstone for the modern civil rights movement. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. famously quoted Amos's exact words. He used this ancient text to reframe the fight for civil rights, elevating it from a political dispute into a moral mandate. Look at the immense scale of the crowd at the National Mall. An ancient shepherd's demand for accountability inspired a movement echoing across history to demand systemic change. Prosperity does not equal virtue, and the demand for real systemic justice never stops flowing.